A rising NFL superstar, a multi-million-dollar contract, a future built for championships. Then, in June 2013, everything shifted in a way no one saw coming. A death in North Attleboro, Massachusetts, pulled investigators into a case that quickly expanded far beyond a single scene. Within hours, one name began appearing again and again in witness statements, digital records, and surveillance footage. Aaron Hernandez. At first, nothing was direct. No clear answers. Brief pause. Only fragments. Surveillance footage showing movement patterns. Phone records linking locations. Brief pause. Cell tower data placing multiple people in the same areas at critical moments. Piece by piece, investigators started rebuilding the final hours before Odin Lloyd was found in an industrial area. But the more they uncovered, the more questions appeared. Why were Hernandez and Lloyd together that night? Why did digital evidence begin forming a timeline that did not fully match early statements? And what was really happening in the hours before everything went silent? Welcome to American Crime Stories. Today, we break down one of the most closely followed investigations in American sports history, where every digital trace mattered, every movement was reconstructed, and every answer led to a
investigators
deeper question.
moved fast. Search warrants expanded. Digital devices were analyzed, data was extracted in bulk, and the deeper they looked, the more structured the evidence became. Text messages, call logs, location patterns, all aligned around the same narrow time window, the night of June 16th to early June 17th, 2013. Each piece reinforced one central fact. Hernandez and Odin Lloyd had been together shortly before Lloyd was found in the industrial area. But the investigation didn't rely on digital evidence alone. Forensic teams examined physical evidence recovered from the scene and surrounding areas. Ballistic analysis connected shell evidence to a firearm type consistent with items recovered during searches. Clothing evidence was also examined for trace material and consistency with movement patterns described in surveillance footage. Then investigators added witness statements. Individuals from Hernandez's social circle were questioned. Some accounts confirmed presence at locations tied to Hernandez. Others contradicted earlier claims. Each contradiction widened the investigative pressure. But one detail stood out more than others. The theory forming inside the investigation was not random violence. Prosecutors began building a narrative centered around fear and control. They argued Lloyd may have had knowledge of earlier incidents involving Hernandez, and that this created a risk Hernandez could not ignore. This shifted the case from a single incident to a possible pattern of escalating concern. However, the defense immediately pushed back. They argued there was no direct proof tying Hernandez to the final act, only proximity, only circumstantial links, only interpretations of movement data. But prosecutors didn't need a confession. They had structure, they had timeline alignment, and they had surveillance, digital tracking, and physical evidence forming a converging point. As the trial approached, the case was no longer about speculation. It was about whether a jury would accept a digital reconstruction of events over the absence of a direct eyewitness. And that decision would define everything that came next. But in court, something unexpected happened. A detail in the evidence presentation began to shift the entire direction of the trial.
2015 at Bristol County Superior Court in Massachusetts. From the first day, prosecutors pushed a fast, structured narrative. They did not rely on one smoking gun moment. They built a sequence. June 16th, 2013, evening hours, Aaron Hernandez and Odin Lloyd seen together. Vehicle movement captured through surveillance routes. Phone records confirming repeated contact patterns. Then the timeline tightened again. Early June 17th, 2013. Odin Lloyd is found in an industrial area in North Attleboro. Multiple shots had been fired. The location was remote but not untraceable. Prosecutors told the jury this was not random movement, it was controlled positioning. Then came the surveillance footage. Video from Hernandez's residence showed him leaving with what appeared to be a firearm shortly before the critical timeline window. The courtroom shifted instantly. Defense attorneys tried to challenge interpretation. They argued the footage did not clearly identify intent or action. They insisted it only showed presence, not responsibility. But prosecutors kept returning to structure. They presented text messages between Hernandez and Lloyd showing coordination earlier in the night. They introduced cell tower data showing overlapping location signals. They presented firearm and ballistic analysis that linked recovered evidence to the type of weapon investigators believed was used in the incident. Each layer reinforced the same timeline. But the defense focused on one core argument. No direct witness placed Hernandez as the person responsible for the final act. No confession existed. No single piece of evidence captured the exact moment of the incident. They described the case as a puzzle built from fragments rather than proof. As the trial continued, witness testimony added pressure. Individuals connected to Hernandez's circle were called to the stand. Some testimonies supported prosecution timelines. Others contradicted earlier statements given during investigation. The courtroom became a battle of consistency versus contradiction. Then, prosecutors delivered their central argument. They claimed Hernandez believed Lloyd had knowledge of earlier violent incidents and feared exposure. This, they argued, created the motive behind the coordinated sequence of events leading to Lloyd's death. The jury listened as investigators reconstructed the night, step by step. Not speculation, not theory alone, but a timeline built from surveillance, digital records, and forensic alignment. Then came the closing arguments. Prosecutors asked the jury to see the full chain, not isolated parts. The defense asked them to see the gaps. After weeks of testimony, evidence disputes, and timeline reconstruction, the jury was sent to deliberate. What followed was not a long wait. It was a decision that immediately changed everything. And when the verdict was read, the entire courtroom went silent. Because the outcome was not just about one night in 2013. It was about whether indirect evidence could define guilt beyond reasonable doubt. And the answer was about to reshape the entire 2015 Bristol County Superior Court. The jury returned after days of deliberation. The courtroom was packed. Reporters, law enforcement, family members, legal teams waiting for a single word. The clerk read the first decision. Guilty of first-degree involvement in the death of Odin Lloyd. No hesitation in the room. No reaction delay. Just a sudden collapse of silence. Aaron Hernandez, once a rising NFL star, was now formally convicted and sentenced to life in prison without parole. The case that started with surveillance clips and phone records had ended in a life sentence. But the investigation did not stop there, because prosecutors and law enforcement had already opened a second, far more complex case. A 2012 double fatal shooting in Boston, Massachusetts, involving Daniel De Abreu and Safiro Furtado. This case was not connected to the Lloyd investigation in the beginning, but as Hernandez's name entered the criminal system, investigators began revisiting older unsolved incidents linked to his social circle and movements. By 2014, Hernandez was formally charged in connection with the Boston case. The structure of this second investigation was different. There was no single, clear timeline like the Lloyd case. Instead, investigators relied heavily on witness recollections, indirect associations, and reconstructed movement patterns. The trial that followed in 2017 was highly contested. Prosecutors attempted to connect Hernandez to the Boston incident through social links, prior interactions, and alleged presence in the area at the time of the shooting. But the defense attacked the foundation of the case. They argued the evidence was speculative, inconsistent, and not strong enough to meet the legal standard required for conviction. Witness credibility became a central issue. Statements changed over time. Accounts conflicted under cross-examination. Unlike the Lloyd case, there was no clear surveillance chain that tied Hernandez directly into a structured timeline. After weeks of testimony, the jury reached a different outcome. Not guilty on all charges in the Boston double incident case. For Hernandez, it was a legal contradiction, convicted in one case, cleared in another. But the legal outcome would never give him time to step back into normal life. In April 2017, shortly after the acquittal, Aaron Hernandez was found unresponsive inside his prison cell at the Souza Baranowski Correctional Center in Massachusetts. He was 27 years old. Authorities ruled the death as self-inflicted. The news spread instantly across the country. But the story did not end there. In the days after his death, a separate scientific discovery reopened public debate. Researchers examined his brain and identified severe chronic traumatic encephalopathy, a degenerative condition linked to repeated head trauma. The findings suggested long-term neurological damage that may have affected behavior, decision-making, and emotional control. The case had now moved beyond courts and investigations. It had entered science, sports safety debates, and national discussion about football-related brain injuries. But one question still lingered. How much of the story was about crime, and how much was about something far deeper happening over time? And that question continues to divide experts to this day. Because the final truth of this case is not contained in a single verdict. It is scattered across investigations, courtrooms, and medical reports. And every new look at the evidence still brings the same uneasy feeling that some answers may never fully close the gaps. Investigation remains one of the most analyzed criminal cases involving a professional athlete in United States history. It began with a missing timeline in June 2013 in North Attleboro, Massachusetts. It expanded into surveillance analysis, digital reconstruction, forensic interpretation, and courtroom battles that lasted years. And it ended with 2 trials, 1 conviction, 1 acquittal, and a broader national conversation about violence, sports culture, and brain injury. For law enforcement, the case became a textbook example of how modern investigations rely on layered evidence, surveillance footage, cell tower data, text messages, witness statements, forensic alignment. Each component played a role in rebuilding events that were not fully visible in real time. For the public, it became something different. A reminder of how quickly fame can collapse when investigations begin to uncover hidden patterns. A reminder that timelines can reveal more than testimony. And a reminder that digital footprints often speak louder than words. But the most lasting impact came from the medical findings. Chronic traumatic encephalopathy research connected to Hernandez's brain reshaped conversations around football safety, head trauma, long-term neurological risk, and the unseen consequences of repeated impact in contact sports. Today, the case is still studied in legal circles, sports discussions, and investigative training programs. Not because it is simple, but because it is layered, conflicting, and unresolved in public perception. And that is what keeps it relevant. Because every time the case is revisited, one question returns. Was this only a criminal investigation? Or was it also a warning about what can happen when too many systems fail at the same time?
Subscribe to American Crime Stories for more true crime investigations and untold cases from across the United States.